and I went to law school at a later kind of stage in my career, and I came from a background in organizing. And so the notion of people getting together to make a difference in their communities has always resonated with me. And I think the traditional legal practice doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. And this space actually does lend itself to that. I'm able to be in space with people that like share the same views about much of what Sejal said about like corporate entities that have way too much power, and the way that our legal system kind of supports and, yeah, allows those folks to kind of control things. And so it's like, how do we create a system that allows us to counteract that in whatever way possible?
To think about the ways that corporate legal power was being entrenched and the ways that it was affecting people's lives here in DC, in this city. And there are definitely groups that are organizing in this space, in particular around the criminal legal system. But as we started doing more outreach to other groups, it became clear that, most of the lawyers in the community who are doing very important work are focused on a different layer of this work, not focused on DC itself, and in particular fighting workers' rights abuses in the law and corporate power abuses in the law here. And so I really wanted to figure out how we could leverage the unique role that lawyers have to be in solidarity with the other folks who are organizing at the local level here.
And I went to just actually one day, because I was gone the rest of it, of the summer convening that they had a few years ago. And I was super inspired by like the energy, the idea of like, we're going to form this community of progressive lawyers who want to reform the legal system generally. I was really psyched about it. And I think you, Steve, maybe made a announcement that if people are interested in helping start lawyers chapters, they should talk to you. So I did, and me and Sejal and Dave and several other people who've been organizing this chapter for the last year or so got together and formed this chapter.
I think so many lawyers, even on our side, can be like, oh, the law says you can't do X, sorry. And I think our job as lawyers who are fighting for justice and fighting for a political and economic system that works for everyone is to say, like, yes, the Supreme Court has said you can't do X in that way or has created this risk. And here's how, let's continue to talk and think and be creative about what we can do to get towards the outcome that you want, which is everybody having dignity at work or everybody having decent housing. Like, what can we do to help you get around those challenges? And I think that has been a really welcome way to show up with local groups.
Right. To be able to have an organization that is outside of my work and like the specific subject area that I worked on, that is like community of lawyers that wants to improve, make the legal system, more of a tool for justice, and also be active as organizers and activists in our own community, and like bringing the particular skills that we have.
One of the cool things about being involved with the local chapters, you get to see the ramifications of these things in real life, working with real people on the ground who are in your community, who are impacted by these laws. And so for me, it's like, okay, it's one thing to have a sense of like, this is what the law says, right? It's another thing to believe what the law should be. And I think a big thing that is impactful for me anyway is that like PPP, it's like these are folks that have an idea of what the law should be, right? And what it means to actually live those values as the law should be. And we talk about basic fairness, basic justice, basic equality. When you're able to do that among folks in your community, and you see the ramifications of those things in your community, it makes a huge difference. And it creates a connection that for me didn't exist before being involved with these folks.
I think one of the things that I found the people in the community and people in the chapter are most excited about are figuring out the ways that lawyers can do things that aren't litigation, because we're all doing this as volunteers, and we're all doing this in our spare time. But like, we also know that the law is the law is a tool that the powerful are always going to use to keep down organizers and people and folks who are fighting for fair pay in the workplace or fair treatment in the county debt collection court, or like just trying to get the city to listen to them and make sure that they have decent housing. And because they're always going to use the law as a tool, like we can help democratize it a little bit. Like a lot of what we do is like, we're not necessarily leading an organizing campaign for this bill, but we can like consult and help a local union or a local workers' rights organization draft language that will get around things that they're concerned about, or we can help make sure that the language they use gets the outcomes that they want.
But I think when you can organize folks that have a thumb on like what's happening in their, whether it's labor law, whatever it is, whether you're a public defender, whatever it is, like these are folks that are doing this in their day to day. These are folks that have an understanding of how these systems are playing out. And I think if you can organize folks that are literally like in the system, then you can interrupt the system, right? Like you have to be able to meet folks where they're at. And so I think that again, I come back to so many folks that I've met from before law school, during law school, and after law school. Like there is a sense of like this is just what it is, right? And I think the organizing component there is so important because you're able to get folks together and say, okay, there's a system, there's a structure that exists, and we have the capability, we have the power, we have the wherewithal, we have the knowledge to interrupt that system, right? And that, I mean, that's the base concept of organizing, right? And
we have access to a lot of people with a lot of influence over legal institutions. And so not only do I believe that we can influence those people, but also like those institutions are responsive to people power within the constituency of lawyers, right? Like, I think about how we have convinced like the powers that be that nominate judges to prioritize professional diversity, and in particular, nominating public defenders who have real experience seeing how the criminal legal system impacts real people and who understand profoundly what the impact of their rulings are, right? Who take the experience of criminal defendants seriously. And I think like we have done that because in part, like those people understand that their constituency is other lawyers, although it really should be everyone. And we can exercise people power there. But I also believe like really in the power of ideas, and people's parity brings real new ideas to the table, in particular, as we think about the appropriate role for federal courts and courts generally to play in a strong and healthy democracy. And, you know, one might say, rather than having new ideas, we're rediscovering very old ones about how people used to think courts should operate in a democracy, but we're popularizing things that even many of the smartest and most experienced lawyers I know have never really given very much thought to. Even people who work on the Judiciary Committee on the Hill have given limited thought to. And now those people like come to our events and we have an opportunity to share our ideas with them. And so I think organizing in this space and taking ideas like changing the Supreme Court's jurisdiction, or thinking about you know, whether or not we should have, whether it should be so easy for like any county in Texas or any right-wing legal group to handpick a judge in the Eastern District of Louisiana or the Western District of Texas and get exactly the person that they want, and like get a nationwide injunction on anything that we do to make people's lives. Like I think that having those conversations about like what tools we have available to fix those problems and which ones are the right ones and what are the trade-offs we should think through and how can we fine-tune them, those conversations are happening in part because of people's parity. For better or for worse, I think that the world has done a pretty good job of generating interest in our work. mostly for worse, right? When the Fifth Circuit tries to make it impossible for women across the country to get mifepristone to end a pregnancy that they don't want to have, like that makes people really interested in our work. When there are questions about the Supreme Court slow walking Trump's trial, so it may not happen, and we may not get an answer to his involvement in the insurrection before the election, like that makes the case for us that these institutions are not responsive to our democracy. When the Supreme Court strikes down student loan cancellation and takes $10,000 out of all of our pockets, that makes the case for this work. So, you know, in meaningful ways, like awareness is raised, people get it, people see that Clarence Thomas has billionaire donors and is openly doing graft in Supreme Court, and there's not a lot of answers and solutions that are being put out there by the progressive legal community. So I think that there's awareness, we just have to go out and seize it.
But I think connecting the reality of like what the courts are doing and acknowledging that, like, yes, as part of the legal community, we are all a part of that, and we have a say. Like we can actually exercise our beliefs, our will. And again, going back to the earlier question about organizing, like if we can acknowledge that, okay, we all think this is wrong. We think it's wrong that Clarence Thomas can just get flown out to wherever he wants to get flown out to and do whatever, and that's all fine. And then next thing you know, the ruling comes out. Like anyone, you don't have to go to law school to recognize that there's a wrong there, right? And I think being able to acknowledge that without sort of the reverence and the deference that's given to the system kind of inherently, right? Like, and so for me, it's really important to be able to connect those dots. Like, no, these things are happening for a reason. Someone made a decision, like a person made a decision. It's not some thing that just like someone made a decision that led to that outcome. And as people who are a part of the system, we have an ability to change it.
I think one of the things that has been really good about our chapter is we are all practicing lawyers, and a lot of folks have kids and families and other commitments, and people are busy. And so we try to find ways to make this sustainable for everyone, even though the work really matters. And we are, you know, putting like our unpaid volunteer, like blood, sweat, and tears into it. And like, you know, we do take it seriously, but it has to be, you know, if we're going to do this and we're going to organize lawyers and we're going to build power for the long run, it has to be something that people can do and also like, you know, be able to make bedtime for their kids or like be able to take a step back because they have a trial. And so figuring out ways to make your work structures flexible and responsive to that, and like having a little bit of redundancy built in, because like I have a crazy week and I can't do as much as I would like, but like Jenny can, and she's like up to speed, you know, like, or vice versa, has been really helpful for us.
Yes, I think I mean, I really like about our chapter that we are of a variety of ages and like different kinds of careers and points in life. And it needs to be accessible for somebody who just wants to show up to a happy hour like once every 6 months, or somebody who wants to get really involved and like do a lot of work, you know, on the weekend, or people who just want to like maybe show up to a rally, or send an email to their council member, or come and think about court reform with other people. So there's like lots of different ways to get involved.
Yeah, like the law can be really siloing, right? Like whatever your practice is, whatever, it's very easy to kind of fall within like, oh, this is just what I do, and I can't have any impact on anything else. I think the ability to be in space with folks that are maybe practicing something else, but you have a shared understanding of what the law should be, is a huge, huge piece of